So let us look at the concept of energy flow. And to understand this concept, let us look at this scenario. A group of ecologists conducted a study in Mavila Forest, and this study actually lasted for a year. What they were actually investigating was energy transfers across trophic levels in this forest. Okay, so what they did was to measure solar energy that was actually received, and then the biomass of the producers and the consumers. And then they also observed energy levels across different trophic levels. And therefore, what they actually noted is that since there are energy losses across the different trophic levels, they noted that only a small fraction of the sunlight energy that the plants actually received is stored within the plants themselves, and actually less is available for other animals such as the top predators, eagles, and the leopards. So this scenario, before we look at the question, is basically showing us that within an ecosystem, for example, the ecosystem in the forest, you have energy being trapped, and this energy is basically sun energy. And this energy is trapped by the plants, and then part of it is available in the plant tissues, and then is also a small fraction is available for other consumers, including the top predators, in this case, the eagles, and then the leopards. Okay, so can we define what energy flow is, and why do we say that it is unidirectional? Why do we say that energy flow is in one direction? The second question is, can we describe the role of producers, consumers, and decomposers in the process of energy transfer? And then the other question is, can we give ecological reasons why only a small fraction of the energy is actually transferred between trophic levels? And then using the Mavila Forest example, can we construct an energy pyramid showing at least 4 trophic levels? Okay, so that means that we need to know what energy transfer is. We need to know why energy losses actually happen. We need to know how this energy is actually transferred, and how can we represent energy transfers in any ecosystem, whether aquatic ecosystem, whether terrestrial ecosystem, like the case of Mavila Forest. Okay, so that is what we are going to look at. So when we talk about energy, the simplest meaning is that energy is the capacity to do work. Organisms actually need energy for them to do work. Okay, this energy is in the form of ATP. Okay, you can actually wake up and have energy if you have taken breakfast, right? So the food that you eat is what is used by the body to give you the energy. Okay, and that energy is in the form of ATP. Okay, so that energy, apart from making you do work around, move, run around, dig, and do a lot of activities, your body itself actually uses this energy for a number of biological processes in your body. These processes can be synthesis processes, or they can be breakdown processes, or even transferring some ions and molecules. Energy is actually required for very many reasons, apart from those that I've just mentioned. Okay, so this energy, where do we get this energy? We have mentioned about the food, but where does that food come from? Humans are heterotrophic. They cannot make their own food. They depend on other organisms for their food. Okay, so even other animals, they can't make their own food. They depend on other sources of food, basically organisms. But the primary source of food or energy are actually the plants. So what do the plants get their energy from? The plants get their energy from the sun. Okay, so when they get that energy from the sun, they convert that energy into chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis. Now, the process of photosynthesis gives us the food in the plants, and this food in the plants is now available for other animals that cannot make their own food. And that's why we are saying that the primary source of energy in an ecosystem is the sun. Now, it is the green plants, the green algae, and some bacteria that can photosynthesize, so that can make their own food, that we can have food available for all other organisms. Okay, so we basically say that if this energy flow does not happen, then we are not going to have life. We cannot have life on Earth if there is no sun, because it is that sun that will help in maintaining different ecosystems. And therefore, when we talk about maintaining different ecosystems, we are basically talking about ecosystem stability. There will be no disruption in the whole ecosystem. So where does this disruption come from? For example, if you don't have plants in an ecosystem, that ecosystem is going to be disrupted, it's going to be unstable, and will not be self-sustaining, because the sun is trapped by, the sunlight energy is trapped by the green plants, and then the green plants can now use that energy, and that energy is now within the plants as chemical energy in the foods that the plants have made. Remember, photosynthesis gives us sugars, and it is in these sugars that we are having the food available. Okay, so we talk about producers first. If you're going to talk about energy flow, so you talk about this the energy coming from the sun, sunlight, sun energy being trapped by the producers, which are the plants, because they can convert that sun energy into chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis. So we say that the green plants are the producers. Since they can make their own food, we say that is autotrophic nutrition, and photosynthesis is one of those forms of autotrophic nutrition. Okay, so now that energy is now available in these plants, it has to be moved to other organisms, which now we call the consumers. So how does that energy move? That energy moves via feeding relationships. So when we have the goats or other herbivores, or even humans who are omnivorous, when they feed on the green plants, that energy is now transferred to them. So that's what we mean by energy flows through feeding relationships. Okay, so here we are. Generally, we have in any ecosystem, we have producers and consumers, and then lastly, the decomposers. So we have three categories of organisms based on how they obtain nutrients, because producers which are the green plants. They are the ones who make their own food. But this food can now be available to other organisms. Now we have the consumers feeding on, for example, plants, but we can also have other consumers that can feed on both plants and animals, but also we have those that can only feed on flesh. Okay, but even if they feed on only flesh, what they are feeding on depended on the green plants. So we have that categorization of organisms. Producers, so the producers include all green plants. The consumers can now be divided into several groups, and we have looked at them. We have the primary consumers. These are the herbivores. They only feed on plants. And then we have the carnivorous animals. These ones feed on herbivores. And these ones can also be called secondary consumers. And then we have omnivorous. The omnivorous feed on both plants and animals, where we looked at the bears and the humans. And then we have what we call top carnivorous animals. These ones feed on other carnivorous animals. So in this case, we can see the plant, that is the tree and the grass there, those are producers. We can see the rabbits, those are herbivores. We can see another carnivorous animal there, and then we will have the decomposers. The decomposers feed on the decaying matter and the helping recycling nutrients within an ecosystem. Okay, so we have already looked at that categorization. The decomposers, here we are calling them saprophytic organisms or saprophytes. They break down the decaying matter and help in recycling nutrients. But we also have other very important organisms that we call the vitrivores. These ones include the earthworms, they basically, and the dung beetles. These ones feed on dead organic matter, like fallen leaves and things like that. They're also very important in nutrient recycling. So the concept of energy flow is very simple. It is that you have the sunlight being trapped by green plants, and then through the process of photosynthesis, this sunlight energy is converted into chemical energy, which is basically in the sugars that have been made through the process of photosynthesis. And now when other animals feed on these plants, they get that energy. Okay, that is the concept. So energy flow happens through feeding relationships. And usually we can illustrate that feeding relationship using what we call food chains, where we illustrate that you can have grass, and then you put an arrow and then put grasshopper. That is a chain, a food chain that you have illustrated there. And then the grasshopper is eaten by a bird. So that is a food chain, meaning that the energy is from the grass into the grasshopper, and then the grasshopper into the bird that eats the grasshopper. Okay, so that is what you can have there. The different categories of organisms that we have looked at, we can represent them, or we can group them as trophic levels. Okay, as trophic levels. Producers are usually the ones that we start with, and then we go to primary consumers, and then secondary consumers, and then tertiary consumers. And if we are to represent the number of organisms at each trophic level, what we will discover is that organisms which are lower, producers are more, and then followed by the primary consumers. You cannot have more primary consumers than the producers. When you have that ecosystem is going to be disrupted. okay, you're going to have an imbalance. Okay, so to represent the fact that across the trophic levels, you are going to have reduction in number, we usually use what we call pyramids. Okay, so this, what you're seeing there is the pyramids to illustrate that producers are very many, followed by the primary consumers, followed by the secondary consumers, and then tertiary consumers, and then we also have what you call the quaternary consumers. Those are top carnivorous animals. Okay, so energy flows from the producers moving up, but across each trophic level. Remember, a trophic level is where we are putting the different groups. Each feeding level within a food chain is a trophic level. So if we are to use the example that I gave, where you have the grass, that is a trophic level. Then we move to, so the grass, the trophic level there is that they are producers. Then we move to the grasshopper. The grasshopper feeds on the grass, right? So the grasshopper is in its own trophic level, and that trophic level is primary consumer. And then you go to the bird. So the bird feeds on the grasshopper. So the bird is in its own trophic level. So that trophic level is secondary consumer. And then we have the eagle. The eagle that can feed on the bird. That is now the tertiary consumer. And then you can also have another organism that can actually feed on the eagle. Then that one, we call that quaternary, secondary, and then quaternary, depending on which organism you have there. But the point here I want to stress is that the trophic levels cannot be very many, because we're going to have energy losses across the trophic levels. So this is where we need to answer the other question about the energy losses. The fact that a small fraction of the energy is available in the plant tissues. And if it is available in the plant tissues, that means it is that small fraction that will be available for the other organisms. So that is where the concept of energy loss happens. That from each trophic level, we are having energy losses. And because we have the energy losses, we cannot have endless number of trophic levels. So usually the trophic levels are 4, but in this case, we are actually having 5, where we have even the quaternary consumers. So why do we have energy losses? Remember, when the sun hits the earth, or the plants trapping the sun energy, or the sunlight energy, that it is a small fraction of what they absorb, okay, or what they trap. The chlorophyll in these plants does not absorb every light energy that is that it can trap. No, that does not happen. They only get a fraction. But of course, some of the light energy will not always, not all the sunlight energy will always strike chlorophyll. We have proportions that will not actually be absorbed by the chlorophyll. Okay, so that is one energy loss before even it being trapped within the ecosystem. Now, the fraction that is being trapped by the plants, of course, it will be used for photosynthesis, right? And to produce these sugars that will be available for these different organisms. But again, some of that energy in the form of sugars will have to be used by the plants themselves, and that means that that energy will not be available for the other organisms to use, because the plants themselves actually also do respire. But also, even in the herbivores, the herbivores also have metabolic processes that utilize energy, and that means that energy again will not be available to the next trophic level. So that's the point there. So metabolic processes such as respiration, growth, and reproduction utilize energy, and that means that that energy will not be available to the next trophic level. And then we have heat, energy lost in the form of heat because of, for example, respiration. Respiration produces heat, okay, and that heat is therefore lost and will not be available to the next trophic level. And then we have other forms of energy. Yes, this is the first point that I started with, that even the plants themselves are not 100% efficient in capturing that energy, so it will not be available for the next trophic level. Again, that the same thing happens in the other trophic levels. Some energy is lost as waste products such as feces and urine, and then some of the energy is lost in undigested food particles. So if you eat food, not everything that is in the food you're going to utilize it. Some of the food your body is not going to digest, and then this is actually passed out as feces, and that is energy loss too. So the whole point is that you will definitely have energy losses across the different trophic levels. The other points that we can pick here is that some of the parts of the organisms are not actually eaten. So if they're not eaten, that means that energy is actually lost at that point. We can simply look at this and see the questions. So back to the question here, I think you can explain what energy flow is. Okay, energy flow is when you are talking about movement or transfer of energy across different trophic levels from producers to top carnivores. Okay, why is it said to be unidirectional? Because it flows from the producers to the consumers. And of course, we know the different categories of the consumers. It cannot be that the plants are depending on herbivores, and therefore it can be from herbivores to plants. No, it is always one directional, because the producers are the ones that are the primary source of food for the next trophic levels. We know the producers make the food available by capturing sunlight energy. The consumers, they feed on the what? On food that is made by other organisms. So why are they important? For example, the predators or the carnivores are actually important in an ecosystem because they help in controlling the number of herbivores, and therefore you don't have population, an overpopulated area with the herbivores. If you have a lot of herbivores, that definitely means that the producers will be wiped out, and that will cause disruption. So that's why consumers, like the carnivorous animals, are actually very important in an ecosystem. They help in restoring balance. Okay, decomposers help in recycling energy. Energy transfers is not always 100% efficient because of the different reasons that we have talked about. An energy pyramid can be used to represent energy at each trophic level. The energy definitely is more in the producers compared to primary consumers. Again, you have more energy in primary consumers than in the secondary consumers. Okay, so we shall